Member for Vancouver Fairview.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, we have now entered graduation season. It's a time of transition for young people. It's a time they want to celebrate. They have a lot to celebrate, both what they've accomplished and their future. It's also a time when they're called upon to exercise judgment, often based on their limited life experience. It's a time their judgment is also often affected by their peers. Shannon Raymond, Ernest Azoadam, Mackenzie Gortfa. Honourable Speaker, these three young people are the reason I'm speaking this morning. It's been almost 6 years since 16-year-old Shannon Raymond died following a party which was followed by a trip on a party bus in which alcohol and drugs were readily available. It's been 15 months since 16-year-old Ernest Azoadam died at Surrey Memorial Hospital after being found abandoned at a Chevron station in Surrey following a ride on a party bus. It's been 6 months since 17-year-old Mackenzie Gortfa and 3 of her friends were picked up in Surrey and given free alcohol while on a party bus. Mackenzie was then sucker punched by a male passenger, and rather than being taken for care, she was taken off the bus, left in a parking lot along with her 3 friends, while the bus drove away. Mackenzie survived, but there could have been another outcome. Honourable Speaker, there are undoubtedly countless other incidents about which we haven't heard. Youth are vulnerable, particularly to those who provide them with drugs and alcohol and ignore their duty to offer protection. Some time ago, the former Transportation Minister, now the Environment Minister, promised to review regulations in order to increase the safety of the party bus industry. In March 2013, she said, should there be a narrowing, a specific type of license? Those are the questions we're asking as we undertake the review. She also said, as a mother and as Minister of Transportation, I will not tolerate unsafe practices that put our young people at risk. Yet there's still no action, simply a pledge to talk tough to the industry. Honourable Speaker, party buses are usually licensed under the Ministry of Transportation's General Authorization category, which is the most wide-open category. It requires no chauffeur permit, fares are not regulated, they do not even have the level of regulation that applies to limousines and taxis. More and more of these vehicles are operating as little more than rolling bars, often targeting underage customers. This unregulated industry is operating on the fringes of the legitimate taxi and limousine industry, and it threatens youth, it threatens public safety, and we as legislators around this continent, are beginning to demonstrate have a very special duty to protect the safety of young people. In 2012, California passed laws to protect underage passengers from harm and to end the practice of dumping sick or distressed passengers in isolated, dangerous locations. There is now a requirement for chaperones to be on board. They caught up to the rules for other passenger vehicles because their party buses, like here in BC, operated in a great gray area. And Honourable Speaker, that legislation passed both the State Senate and the Assembly with no opposition whatsoever. Recently, in Long Island, New York, a bus driver claimed not to know that 42 teens on board had more than 100 cans of beer plus bottles of hard liquor. This was only brought to police attention following a 911 call from a bystander who heard a young girl's screams for help. As a result of this in New York, a state assemblyman and a state senator are introducing laws that would regulate the party bus industry, saying, we are incredibly lucky that none of the children on that bus were hurt. We cannot afford to take that chance again. In Washington State, the Utilities and Transportation Commission looked at the United States and BC, although they had not had much in the way of reported incidents, and they've decided to be proactive. They've begun the process to develop legislation for the next legislative session in January. The Commission's report was well received by both parties in a joint transportation committee, and they expect the legislation, when it's introduced in January, to have bipartisan support. The study that they presented that was so well received noted that between 2009 and mid-2013, party buses were involved in 22 incidents in the United States and British Columbia, and 21 of those resulted in fatalities. Honorable Speaker, there is industry support for regulation. Tommy Cosito, the longtime owner of Vancouver Party Buses and Limousines, wrote to the Transportation Minister recently asking that he tighten the rules, saying that unsafe operators were giving his industry a bad name. Quote, "At least 50% are not playing by the rules. General authorization license to operate a limo or bus is simply practically turnkey. There are no background checks." We see, Honorable Speaker, ads for the industry that show open drinking. That is part of what sells this to children. Honorable Speaker, we can't afford to turn a blind eye and simply say the law is there, it should be enforced. It's clear that a greater level of regulation, at least akin to taxis and limousines, needs to be brought in to protect young people from unscrupulous operators who unfortunately are making up a large part of the expansion of this industry. Honorable Speaker, we need greater enforcement of existing laws as well as new regulation that should be brought in. Honorable Speaker, we need stiffer fines because we cannot afford, Honorable Speaker, to wait for another tragedy before we act. Honorable Speaker, the time is now. Thank you.
Member for West Vancouver, Sea to Sky.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite. I am glad to have the opportunity to speak to the issues raised by the honourable member, for the subject certainly is worthy of discussion. Youth safety, especially at this time of the year, is a concern, but really we should be thinking about it every day. Safety is about the quality of judgment and decision-making in a complex environment, not just for government and industry, but for each and every one of us at an individual level. This issue is recent, current, and compelling to me for last year, the year in which in the province we had 2 grave incidents involving youth, party buses, and substance abuse. My daughter was celebrating her high school graduation, and my older daughter the year before. And really, what is a father to do? We all know what, or perhaps we've forgotten, but I think we do all know what it's like to be young, perhaps naive, maybe impetuous, during a rite of spring, a graduation, when you feel as though you'll live forever. Well, as a parent, you hope they make good decisions. You trust that they think critically, and that they understand that every day they're making choices that have consequences, and that ultimately they're the ones that will live with those consequences. You trust that they understand the need to be aware of their surroundings, that they assess risk and make decisions appropriately, be it in the mountains, on the ocean, or downtown, be it biking or driving or gaming, meeting a new dog, a new boss, or attending another party. We all have to keep an eye out, to look and listen and make thoughtful, considered decisions. My wife and I tried to incorporate the idea of a decision tree in our family discussions, albeit imperfectly. We talked with our girls about our lives and choices, both good and bad, the risks, the potential and real consequences. I know when my wife will comment that I do have a tendency to be creative, or very creative perhaps, in my negative consequence generation, but you know, I don't like to be surprised. And I don't want my kids to be either. Bad things can happen regardless, but there's little to be lost from thinking critically and understanding the risks you take. As a parent, we just can't be there all the time ready to help out. Right now, my 2 girls are in Africa, and for whatever reason, the whip wouldn't give me leave for a month. We were on FaceTime with them yesterday, and they were telling us about what was going on with them, and it all seems good, but they're on their own way. And we can only hope that with some good judgment and a little luck, they'll be home in no time. So whether you're in Africa or Vancouver, in the mountains or on the job, hanging out at the lake or on a party bus, we all have decisions to make. As a society and as a government, we have a collective responsibility to legislate and regulate and create codes of ethic, and we do. From food to fuel, mediations to merry-go-rounds, the rules of conduct are most often clear, as they are in the circumstances of party buses. Open alcohol is prohibited in a motor vehicle, be it a car, a limousine, or a bus. It is against the law. I understand the passenger transportation branch of the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure contacted bus charters and limousine operators to review their policies regarding transporting liquor in vehicles and reminded them of their obligations and responsibilities under the Liquor Control and Licensing Act. We must recognize that not only are there many transportation options that graduates will be making use of at this time of the year, transportation planning should be top of mind given the usual intensity and duration of grad celebrations. But that there will be many other critical choices to be made that day or on any day, and there isn't any substitute for vigilance and personal judgment. Government has a part to play, as do parents, but ultimately it's a responsibility of the individual to be their own best advocate, to keep an eye out for themselves and others, to plan for the worst and hope for the best, at least. That's what this farmer would do. And I do welcome the chance to ruminate on our collective and individual rights and responsibilities, and I do thank the member opposite for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, member. Vancouver Fairview.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And while I welcome the concern expressed by the member for West Vancouver's Sea to Sky, we ultimately part company over the thought that in the end we have to essentially police ourselves. Honourable Speaker, there's so many areas in which we don't apply that criteria to adults, let alone to young people who are feeling their legs for the first time as young adults. We have had serious incidents in British Columbia. We have had fatalities. We have had incidents that could have been far more serious than they were and might have been fatalities. More incidents will unlikely happen if we do nothing. Honourable Speaker, the industry itself is calling for greater regulation. As I mentioned, Tommy Casito also said, Tommy Casito of Vancouver Party Buses and Limousines, government right now has their blinders on. I think they should open their eyes and realize these challenges aren't going to go away. Todd Curley, also a general manager in the industry, said the industry has been, quote, spiraling out of control for 3 years now. Honourable Speaker, we have an industry that openly advertises that when you are on their bus, the liquor laws will be broken. They do this by running ads showing people standing up, holding open bottles of alcohol and open glasses of alcohol. Honourable Speaker, we know this is illegal whether you're an adult or a child, but we are not taking action. Honourable Speaker, do we have to wait for another tragedy while parents of children who have died lobby and advocate and try to get some closure and respect for the loss their families suffered? Honourable Speaker, Vancouver City Council has endorsed a call for regulation, as has Maple Ridge. Recently, the Lower Mainland Municipal Government Association passed a call for regulation, and this will now go to the Union of BC Municipalities. Support for government action in this area is growing because there's a lack of appropriate regulation for the limousine and party bus industry. There is no requirement for chaperones. There is no requirement that people not be dropped off in an unsafe manner in the middle of nowhere if they are in distress or in trouble. Honourable Speaker, it is time to make change. It is time to listen to the voices of parents. It's time to listen to the voices of other jurisdictions that are being more proactive than British Columbia after reviewing British Columbia's own history. Honourable Speaker, we can do better than simply saying that if there's open alcohol on a bus, you're subject to a $234 fine and a liquor pour out. It is time to bring in specific regulation. Thank you.
Thank you, member.